Hi, I'm Althea, and I didn't go to the surprise party my daughter threw for me, not because I refused, because I didn't know it was happening. She told everyone I chose not to come. She told them I ruined it. But what they don't know is that party was never meant for me. They used my name, my face, my story, without ever inviting the real me. What hurts more than being excluded is realizing you were never supposed to be included in the first place. How do you confront a daughter who replaced you before you even had a chance to speak? And if your own child rewrites your story, who are you allowed to be? The envelope sat at my doorstep like it had arrived on its own legs, pale cream, hand-addressed in Vera's looping script. She'd always written like someone raised in a time that wasn't hers, elegant, slightly dramatic, and impossible to read if you weren't her mother. I turned it over in my hand once before sliding a butter knife along the flap and pulling out the card. Let's meet at Rosewood Lounge, Saturday night, 7 p.m. No signature, no context, nothing that even hinted it was about me, let alone my birthday. Just an invitation with a time and place, like I'd been penciled into a calendar someone forgot to keep. I stood by the window for a long while after, staring at the cul-de-sac in the late morning sun, waiting for something more to happen. It didn't. By the time I made tea, I'd already talked myself into and out of going twice. 1 to 200 characters. My birthdays used to mean something, not just cake and photos, but family. Before William passed, he always made a fuss. Vera, too, back when she was still in college. She'd come home early, help him bake those lopsided lemon cakes, always pretending she wasn't taking over when she clearly was. I still remember one year, she glued glitter to a hand-painted sign, Queen Mom's Day. That was 10, maybe 12 years ago. Now my birthdays pass like soft wind through a screen, barely noticed unless I close my eyes and lean into it. 700 characters. 2 Sundays ago, Vera promised she'd take me to church. Let's go together, Mom, she said, just like we used to. I miss that. I don't know if she believed herself when she said it. I chose to. I put out my blue dress the night before and sat by the door from 8:45 to 9:30. By 10, I'd made peace with the silence. She didn't text. She didn't call. I told myself she must have gotten caught up with work. Maybe an emergency. Anything but what it really felt like, being left behind. 1,000 characters. Later that week, she called, bubbly, cheerful. Hey, Mom, still good for Saturday? Her tone was light, like we'd spoken yesterday. I asked gently, just the two of us? There was a pause. It'll be simple, she said, relaxed. That's when something tugged at my gut. Not a shout, just a whisper. I told her I wasn't feeling up to going out. I'll stay in this time, I said. She didn't argue. She never does when I say no. It should have ended there, but a mother's instinct rarely lets her sleep easy. 800 characters. Saturday came. I roasted a chicken thigh with rosemary and garlic, boiled a few red potatoes, and poured a glass of the Pinot I keep for slow evenings. I watched a rerun of that show where the mom never ages, no matter how many years pass. When the credits rolled, I rinsed my plate and went to bed with a book. I only read 2 pages before my eyes closed. It wasn't sadness that kept me still. It was the echo of nothing sitting too comfortably in my chest. 800 characters. The phone buzzed just past midnight. I squinted at the screen. Voicemail from Donna Phelps, Vera's old high school math teacher turned family friend. Hey, Althea, just wanted to say, everyone was asking where you were tonight. I thought for sure you knew. I sat up. My skin prickled. I played it again. Thought for sure you knew. My fingers tightened around the phone. I hadn't known. Not a thing. Not about the party. Not about any of it. And suddenly, I didn't feel tired anymore. 1,000 characters. I woke to the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but accusing. The sunlight crawled over the curtains like it didn't want to be seen either. My phone was blinking on the nightstand. Missed calls, texts, people I hadn't heard from in years. Why didn't you show up? She was heartbroken. Unbelievable. I read each message twice, trying to make sense of the scolding from strangers who now acted like I owed them explanations. Scrolling through the messages, my chest tightened. The names felt like ghosts, people who used to send holiday cards or ask about Vera when she still went by baby girl. Now they sounded like a jury, each one pointing fingers at someone they'd already sentenced. Me, went on 200 characters. I opened my laptop and went to Vera's Facebook. The screen loaded slowly, almost taunting me. Photos came first. Balloons, cake, hugs. There she was, in the center of it all. In one shot, Vera stood near a sparkling table, arms wide, face aglow. The caption under it chilled me. Some people don't value what's done out of love. I tried. Thousands of likes, hearts, crying emojis, comments flooded beneath. You're such a good daughter. She doesn't deserve you. Sending you hugs. They didn't know they were talking about me. 900 characters. What stung most wasn't the attention. Vera always knew how to work a crowd. It was what wasn't there. Not a single post mentioned me by name. No tag. No direct reference. Even the cake, lavish floral, read, "To the strongest woman." Not Mom. Not Althea. To everyone else, I was just a figure in the background who had decided not to show up, but they didn't even know who they thought I was. 800 characters. Around midday, the phone rang. Donna's name lit the screen. For a second, I thought maybe she'd heard I wasn't invited, that she might want to talk about it. Her voice was clipped. "You didn't come," she said. "You embarrassed your daughter in front of everyone." I opened my mouth to respond, to explain that I didn't even know there was a party, but she interrupted. "There's always an excuse, huh?" Click. I stared at the phone in my hand, heart pounding, breath caught halfway. I hadn't been embarrassed until that moment. 1,000 characters. Back in the kitchen, I stood in front of the sink without turning on the water. My hand found the mug Vera gave me last Mother's Day. Pale pink with gold letters. Best mom ever. I held it a little too tight. Not enough to break it, but enough to know I wanted to. Once, just hearing her call me Mom made my day. Now, I wasn't even a footnote at my own party. 900 characters. I opened Vera's post again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I started to type. A sentence, then a paragraph. Then delete, start again, erase. I thought about calling her. Just one conversation to clear things up. But I didn't. I knew I wouldn't be heard, just interpreted. So I sat there at the kitchen table, phone in hand, the light growing dim behind me. And for the first time, I realized that silence can sometimes scream louder than any voice. 700 characters. The invitation came from Vera's aunt, a sweet woman who usually meant well. Just brunch, the card read, followed by a little heart drawn in the corner. I arrived at the restaurant, one of those places that calls itself rustic but charges extra for the air, and immediately felt the air shift. Everyone was already seated, smiles tight, eyes dancing with the kind of politeness that makes your stomach twist. I slid into a chair. A moment later, an iPad was passed my way. "Look at how beautiful everything was," someone said, too brightly. Pictures from the party filled the screen. Vera beaming beside flower arrangements. Vera laughing with her arm around someone's grandmother. Vera holding a microphone mid-speech. Then a woman I barely knew cleared her throat and began reading, "To my resilient, patient, unwavering mother." Every word was soaked in admiration for a daughter who supposedly pulled off the impossible, alone, unappreciated. Then came the question, "Althea, would you like to say something?" My throat closed. That wasn't a question. That was bait. 1,400 characters. While they chatted about centerpieces and canapes, I listened. Each story painted Vera as the devoted daughter, her generosity, her grace. Not one mentioned why I hadn't been there. Not one person asked, because they thought they already knew. She made sure of it. I felt like a ghost with a pulse, present, but not accounted for. 800 characters. Someone handed me a leather-bound album, heavy, smooth. I opened it. Photo after photo. Vera speaking, posing, being hugged, toasted. One page showed a speech excerpt with my name. My resilient mother taught me strength. But I wasn't in a single frame, not waiting for a surprise, not walking in late, not even candid in the background. To anyone flipping through it, I was a concept, a character she referenced to prove her own goodness. A fictional mother created for a fictional tribute. 1,200 characters. I drove home in silence. The mug Vera gave me last fall was still by the sink, unwashed. I reached for it, but my hand slipped. It hit the counter, bounced, and cracked clean down the side. I stared at the break. Of course, what else was going to split wide open today? 900 characters. That night, sleep refused me. My body ached in places I'd stopped paying attention to years ago. I replayed every moment from brunch, each clipped comment, each sideways glance, each silence that rang louder than a shout. They hadn't ambushed me. No, that would require the courtesy of confrontation. They performed for me, around me, without me. And Vera? She rewrote the entire day, cast herself as the hero, and gave me a costume I'd never agreed to wear. I wasn't erased by mistake. I was revised on purpose. 1,200 characters. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I laid awake, still tangled in the images and voices from brunch. After tossing through the sheets for what felt like hours, I slid from bed and sat down in the dark with my laptop. It glowed brighter than I expected, harsh against the silence. Vera's social media pages were humming. I scrolled through post after post from guests, sharing snapshots of the celebration. I clicked a video. Vera stood beneath a cascade of fairy lights, her hands gently cradling a wine glass. She looked radiant, poised. I watched her say words I didn't recognize, about strength, gratitude, love. Her voice floated like honey, but none of it tasted sweet. I waited for my name, for any sign this had truly been meant for me. But all I found were carefully chosen phrases, polished for applause. 1,200 characters. Another video loaded. A close-up of the cake, pale ivory frosting, roses sculpted along the edge. The words piped in gold, shimmered under the camera flash. To the strongest woman. No happy birthday, no mom. People clapped as Vera posed beside it, holding a knife she didn't need help lifting. There was laughter, cheering, but no one seemed to ask who exactly the cake was for. 1,000 characters. Clinking glasses followed. Toasts and dim lighting, everyone smiling. One woman leaned in to say, "She's the reason we're all here." Another added, "She's so resilient." Vera raised her glass and gave a speech, generic, charming. "She's been through so much, always stayed strong, even when others didn't understand her." The she hung in the air, undefined. It could have been anyone, and that was the point. I wasn't being honored. I was being used to validate a performance. I was the ghost haunting the backdrop of a celebration I never lived. 900 characters. Another clip started automatically. Vera on stage again, this time pretending to choke up. "It's hard," she said, "showing love when it isn't always returned." A man in the crowd called out, "You did your best." The room erupted in applause. I watched from my kitchen, heart pounding with something I didn't have a name for. Shame, rage, recognition. That party had nothing to do with me. It was never for me. It was always about her. 900 characters. I closed the laptop slowly. The screen went black, and in its reflection I saw my face. Tired. Still. I whispered to the room, to no one in particular. "They're building a version of me that doesn't exist." The woman in the mirror didn't blink. She didn't cry. She just kept watching, like she'd known this day would come. 800 characters. Later that night, I pulled out my notebook, the one Vera gave me on my 65th birthday with a sticker that said, "Tell your story." I opened to a blank page and wrote a single line. I was not invited. I was used. Then I capped the pen, turned off the light, and walked away from the desk. I didn't take the notebook with me. I didn't need to. 700 characters. The call came just after breakfast. Marlene, my next-door neighbor, had been at the party. She hesitated at first, as though unsure how much I already knew. Then she said, "They announced a donation, a chairlift, for that elder care center you volunteered at." I blinked. "Donation? In your name?" Vera said it was your idea, that it came from your heart. I managed a polite thank you before hanging up. I sat at the table, the toast on my plate untouched, something clenched tight behind my ribs. That afternoon, I found the clip on Vera's page. She stood before a microphone, her voice warm and practiced. "This chairlift," she said, "is a surprise from my mom, who's always cared for others more than herself." The crowd clapped. Some teared up. I stared at the screen, heart still. I hadn't been asked. I hadn't been told, but my name had been used like a signature she'd forged with a smile. 1 and 200 characters. I pulled out a box from my closet, the one where I kept old cards, calendars, and correspondence. I searched through years of emails and text chains just to be sure I hadn't missed anything. Nothing. Not a word about a gift. Not even a hint. My fingers trembled around the edges of a notepad. I started scribbling lines I thought I'd say, then crossed them out. I stood and paced the room, reciting imaginary conversations. Each version ended the same. Her looking shocked. Me feeling small. But I was done playing out scenes where I walked away silenced. 1,000 characters. We met in her apartment the next evening. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tight ponytail, the way she dressed when she wanted to seem casual but calculated. She hugged me quickly, then stepped back. "I'm glad you came," she said, motioning me to the couch. I didn't sit. "Why did you say that gift came from me?" She blinked. "What?" "The chairlift. You stood on a stage and told everyone it was from me. I never agreed to that." She exhaled, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I thought you'd be happy. It reflects who you are. Always giving." I shook my head. "No, Vera. It reflects who you need me to be for your version of things. Her smile faded. Why do you always twist what I do? You're the one who didn't show up. People were hurt. The air between us thickened. I didn't show up because I wasn't told there was something to show up for. I was trying to honor you, she said flatly. No, I replied, voice steady. You were trying to craft me into something more convenient. From 400 characters. She didn't respond. She just crossed her arms and stared at a spot above my shoulder. I stepped toward the door. My hand hovered on the knob. If you're going to write my character into your life's play, I said without turning, at least ask me before you give her lines. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was calculation. Paused. I opened the door and walked out. The hallway smelled like lemons and detergent. My heart thundered, but I kept my chin level. She didn't call after me. 900 characters. Back home, I sat at my desk with the same notebook I'd written in days before. The pages smelled faintly of lavender from the drawer sachet. I dated the top corner, then started writing. Not for her. For me. Not to preserve the memory, but to burn through the lie. I wrote down everything. The performance, the donation, the twist, the moment she looked at me like I was an obstacle. No more forgiving what I was never asked to agree to. This wasn't just about being erased. It was about being rewritten. 1,000 characters. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun dipped below the pecan tree out back. The dishes were done. The clock ticked too loud. My hands rested on the table's edge, steady in stillness. That conversation with Vera echoed in my ears, the parts she didn't say, somehow louder than the ones she did. I clicked open her Elder Care Foundation's website. The header displayed a photo of me, smiling, cropped from an old Thanksgiving, and next to it, a quote I never said, "Giving is how I live, always has been." My mouth dried. I opened the Our Story page. Another image of me, walking beside Vera at a farmer's market. She'd snapped that picture while telling me to look away from the camera so it'd seem candid. Now it was being used to sell sincerity. I called Thomas Walker, an old colleague of Williams, now a retired attorney. "I need to ask you something," I said. And I did, calmly, directly. I told him everything. He didn't sound surprised. 1,100 characters. By the next day, with Thomas's help, I'd written a formal cease and desist letter. It was printed on thick cream paper, folded neatly into a plain envelope. There was no fury in it, no poetry, just facts. I placed it on my entryway table, next to the vase of artificial lilies Vera gave me last year. The letter read, "You do not have permission to use my name, image, or words, real or invented, for any professional or promotional purpose. You do not have permission to tell my story for your gain." It wasn't vengeance, it was a line, and for the first time, it would be drawn by me. 200 characters. 3 days later, Maris arrived for her usual cleaning shift. She brought with her a plastic grocery bag, and inside it, a stack of printed screenshots. "I didn't want to pry," she said softly, "but I thought you should see this." The images were from a private group chat. Vera's name was there. So were a few people I recognized from the party photos. One message stood out. "Don't tag her. She ruins the mood. I'm tired of walking on eggshells for someone who's always the victim." Another chimed in. "She still thinks this is 1998. Someone added a laughing emoji. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I just nodded, thanked Maris, and slid the pages into the back of my journal. I didn't need to memorize their words. I only needed to remember who said them. Tsakoyan, 400 characters. That evening, I made quiet choices. I opened my Facebook account, hovered for a moment, then deactivated it without ceremony. I unsubscribed from Vera's mailing list. I scrolled through the family group chat, read one last picture of Vera's dog in a birthday hat, then quietly exited the thread. No announcement, no farewell. For the first time in my life, I chose solitude without apology, and it felt like clarity. 1,000 characters. Later that night, I turned off all the lights except the one over my writing desk. The notebook waited, spine still creased from days before. I opened it and wrote a single sentence across the page. I am not angry. I am no longer willing. I closed the book gently. It didn't slam. It didn't tremble. I had not declared war, but I had reclaimed the battlefield. 800 characters. It was just after breakfast when Maris knocked gently on the back door. She never used the front unless it was urgent. I knew before I even opened it that she was holding something heavier than groceries. She placed the manila folder on my kitchen counter without saying much. Inside was a printed email forwarded to her anonymously by someone from Vera's event staff. Maris lowered her eyes. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you should see this. The message was from Vera, short, direct, cold. Even if she doesn't come, I'll still get what I need from the event. I didn't speak, didn't blink, just reread the sentence twice, then folded the paper back up. The shape of everything was clearer now. She hadn't forgotten me. She hadn't misunderstood. She had planned for my absence, needed it. Kuar's 100 characters. By noon, a friend of a friend, one of those distant connections that only seem to surface when something awful needs witnessing, sent me a clip. You need to see this, the message read. I clicked the link. It was footage from Vera's latest speaking event. She stood beneath a banner covered in pastel slogans about compassion and legacy, and beside her, a woman, elegant, older, polished in a navy dress. Vera's voice came through clear. This woman has been my true north, my rock, my spiritual mother. The room applauded. I didn't. I watched the woman nod gracefully, smiling as she accepted the honor I hadn't even been offered. My hands went cold. The breath in my chest thickened. Vera hadn't just rewritten me. She'd recast me entirely. 300 characters. I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything or pace the floor. I turned off the video, set my phone down, and stood in the darkened kitchen until my knees ached. Then I lay on the couch with the blanket pulled over my chest. My eyes didn't close. This wasn't grief. Grief is loss. This was deletion, strategic, clinical. I wasn't erased accidentally. I was edited out for effect, and it worked. 1,000 characters. Later that night, I sat at my writing desk, pulled out the same stationery I'd used for thank you notes and condolences for years. I drafted a letter, every sentence sharp, every paragraph clean. I said everything I needed to say, without apology. Then I folded it once, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it. I opened my desk drawer, labeled a new folder, if she ever asks why, and placed it inside. I didn't write her name on the front. That would have been too generous. 100 characters. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom. The overhead light flickered slightly, one of those little household things I kept forgetting to fix. I stared at myself. Not the lines, not the gray, just the expression. If she needed a different kind of mother, I whispered, I could have been that, if she had just asked. The reflection didn't flinch. It accepted the truth. And in that silence, a kind of strength returned. Not loud, not fast, but sure. 1,000 characters. While clearing out the back corner of my linen cabinet, I found the old answering machine we hadn't used in years. I plugged it in, more out of curiosity than intention. A few blinking red dots flickered. Most were static. Then the third message played. "Hey, Althea." William's voice came through, tender but certain. "If you're ever caught between what looks good and what feels right, go with the one that keeps you steady. Don't let the noise tell you who you are." It was dated 2 months before his stroke. I played it again and again. The room didn't feel empty anymore. That voice, familiar and grounded, settled my spine like a beam reset into place. 1,200 characters. The phone rang at 3:22 the next afternoon. I recognized the number as Vera's assistant. "Hi, Ms. Morley. Vera asked me to extend a personal invitation. There's a charity brunch this Sunday. She wants to honor you publicly to clear up the misunderstanding." She paused, as if that phrasing had been practiced. "There will be cameras," she added. "A press release. She'll say some words, then invite you on stage." I didn't answer right away. I thanked her for the call and hung up without confirming anything. The call wasn't about healing. It was about optics. 1,000 characters. That evening, I sat at my desk and turned on the little lapel mic I used for Zoom book clubs. No script, no editing. I looked directly into the lens. "Vera," I began, "I'm not declining to attend because I'm bitter. I'm declining because I won't be part of something that asks me to play a role in a story where I was already erased." I let the words breathe. "I will not stand next to someone who chose to replace me before she tried to reach me." I saved the recording onto a flash drive, slipped it into a small envelope. No press, no crowd, just truth delivered cleanly. 1,300 characters. 2 days later, the video surfaced online. I hadn't uploaded it. Someone else had, likely a staffer or intern who knew the real weight behind it. Within hours, Vera's name trended. "Exploiting your own mother?" One comment read. "Shameful." Brand partners pulled out of her wellness campaign. Her Instagram followers dropped by thousands. She didn't post anything for a week. Then 2, she couldn't. The silence she had always used to control me had finally turned back toward her. 1,000 characters. On the third Sunday, I visited the community garden we'd used to frequent when Vera was little. I brought a single rose bush, pale pink, already in bloom. I knelt in the soil, gloved hands, steady. I planted it alone, watered it, smoothed the dirt like a bedspread, not to replace anything, but to root something that belonged to me. The plaque I placed beside it read simply, "To my own beginning." I stood up, brushed my knees, and whispered, "She may have erased me from a stage, but I've reclaimed every inch of my silence." 1,000 characters. The silence that followed my message wasn't harsh or unsettling. It simply was. No response from Vera. No sudden turn of remorse or outpouring of apologies. Just space. And strangely, it was enough. I read a few headlines about sponsors backing out and Vera's foundation postponing public appearances. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't feel satisfaction either. There was no gloating, no sense of victory, just confirmation. What I said mattered because it was mine to say. 1,200 characters. There were conversations that never happened. She never called, never wrote. Not even a message passed through someone else. For a while, I waited for them. Then I stopped. It wasn't anger that faded. It was expectation. I went back and reread the pages in my journal, not to relive anything, but to see myself more clearly. What I saw wasn't a woman in mourning. It was someone who had finally stopped trying to be understood by someone who refused to listen. And that in itself felt like healing. 1,000 characters. A week later, I returned to the community garden. The rose bush I planted had taken to the soil better than expected. Its petals were wide and luminous in the morning light. I sat on the bench nearby, same one Vera and I used to share during summers when she was little. This time, someone else joined me, an older woman with thick silver curls and quiet eyes. We exchanged names. She was there visiting her son's plot. He'd passed 2 years prior. We talked about children, about the strange ache of pride and pain when your name gets left out of their stories. Neither of us needed to say too much. The recognition sat between us like shared shade. 1,000 characters. As I left the garden, I passed a mother kneeling beside her toddler, helping her press seeds into soft dirt. The motion flicked a memory. Vera, maybe 5, cradling a frayed teddy bear with one button eye. She'd stood beside me as I stitched a torn seam on its paw. "Mom," she'd said, "you fix everything." That memory still lives in me, not as a wound, but as a fact. She once knew what I was capable of, and maybe, deep down, she still does. 100 characters. On my next birthday, I didn't wait for a knock or a call. I baked a small carrot cake, just the way I like it. No nuts, extra cinnamon. I lit a single candle, not for making wishes, but to mark something I didn't have the words for back then. I cut a slice, poured myself a cup of decaf, and sat by the window. No decorations, no speeches, no scripted gratitude. And yet for the first time in years, it felt like a real celebration. Mine. Peace, I've learned, doesn't ask for applause. It just stays. 1,200 characters. Not all endings need to be tied with bows. Some just need to be unknotted. In the quiet moments that followed, I realized something no celebration, apology, or grand gesture could ever teach me. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remove yourself from a story that was never truly about you. I used to believe that silence meant weakness. Now, I know it can be the loudest declaration of dignity. Maybe you've had moments like this, where you weren't seen for who you really are, but for what someone needed you to be. So, let me ask, have you ever walked away not in anger, but in truth? And what did that teach you? If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone in your life, drop a comment below, type 1, or share where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate with you, I'd still love to hear why. Let's open that conversation. Let's grow together. If you'd like to hear more real stories like this, filled with life lessons, raw truth, and healing, make sure you subscribe. Tap that button so you don't miss the next story. This community, this space, is for all of us who have something to say, even if we whisper it.